It's the matchup that we've all been waiting for. The Georgia Bulldogs go on the road to Tuscaloosa, Alabama to face off against the Alabama Crimson Tide in this Week 5 2024 matchup here of the college football season. My name is Marcus. Welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. I am the co-host here at First and Long. My loyal compadre, my right-hand man, Mason, is out on the road, hanging out with his family, doing a little vacation. I hope you're having a good time out there, bud. We'll see you this weekend for some college football action. But we've got a big game to break down here, so let's jump into this thing. If you're new to the First and Long College Football Show, I hope that you'll consider hitting the subscribe button. We have got Power 4 college football coverage wall to wall all year round because college football is a year-round sport. We want you to come be part of our awesome little community that we're building here. We're having a great time here in 2024. We started last year in 2023, and we're growing quickly, and we hope that you will come be part of our growing family here at First and Long. Lot of fun. And this season is really just getting going. And this game, I think, is going to signify really the start of a spectacular season. College football, we've had awesome games here, there, but it really starts to get going whenever you get some powerhouse conference matchups, and we're really starting to see that this week. And from here on out, it's really going to be full throttle. So you're going to want to make sure that you're subscribed. That way, you know, whenever we got content being posted, all that good stuff that happens throughout the week. We've got live shows on Sunday evening, Tuesday evening, and late Saturday night after the games for our overreaction show. A lot of fun. We've got a betting show on Thursdays. If you're into that type of thing, we invite you to come join us for that. That's called Between the Lines. That's one of my favorite shows that we do here on First and Long. And we're having a great year betting. So come and join us there for that show. We'd love to have you. Let's jump into this matchup. Georgia and Alabama have not met up a whole lot in the regular season over the last few years. All the matchups that look, everybody thinks of Alabama, Georgia. There's matchups that come to mind. The 2021 National Championship where Georgia beat Alabama, I think, is what comes to Georgia fans' mind. But there has been more times than not, obviously, that Alabama has beat Georgia in an SEC championship, 2017 national championship game. So this is a rivalry that really, I think, got started up, got to burn in there in 2017. And ever since then, it's been year in, year out, just about, minus the 2019 LSU year, where every once in a while you'll have a team have a pop here, but it's been these two teams at the top of the SEC for the last few years, the better part of a decade now. And of course, it was Alabama that knocked Georgia off of their track to try to win 3 national championships in a row last year, and then went on to lose to Michigan. And of course, Georgia goes on to beat Florida State by 60 points or whatever it was and end the season with 1 loss. This is a powerhouse matchup. And whenever we talk about powerhouse matchups like this, we look at everything under a microscope. These are a couple of the most talent-rich rosters in the country, and I know I'm not telling anybody anything that they don't know, but every little mistake, every little flaw for these teams is going to be, it's all going to be put out on the table here against one of the better teams that each of these teams will face this year, talent-wise anyway. Georgia is a 2.5 to a 2-point favorite. I've seen a lot of 2s now. Over-under sitting at 48, so pretty low over-under there set by Vegas. This one is set to kick off at 7:30 p.m., as I said, there in Tuscaloosa. Now, there's a few matchups that I feel are most important in this football game. But as I said, every aspect is important in this football game. A special teams blunder, muffed kick, anyone. You can point to a play here, play there in a bunch of these games between Georgia and Alabama that could possibly change the outcome of the game. So we're going to talk about some of the ones that concern me the most, and we'll try to round it out here with, kind of covering all our bases. But this is an area of concern for me as far as I'm a Georgia fan, okay? Our channel is not a Georgia channel. It's not an Alabama channel. It's not an SEC channel. we cover all the big matchups in college football. So don't get it twisted. I love my Georgia Bulldogs, but I'm a college football fan first, and that's why we started this channel. And Mason is the exact same way. But Georgia is a team that we know intimately. I mean, this is a team that we hold near and dear to ourselves, right? So it doesn't please me to say that, Alabama pushed Georgia around last year in the SEC championship. They blew up Georgia's lines of scrimmage. And it was something as a Georgia fan that we had not seen in a couple of years. In 21-22, Georgia always had that guy on the defensive line, whether it be Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis. But this team just doesn't have that. You've got some awesome guys, some awesome personalities on this defensive line. You've got some senior guys, guys rotating off the bench that are seniors. But there's no real, NFL first-round talent on this defensive line. There's just not. Now, does that mean that they could not have gotten better from last year? Sure. It's very possible. And we're going to find out in this football game. Is it possible that Alabama's a little worse on the offensive line than they were last year? It's possible. But we haven't seen that yet, minus the game against South Florida where there was some shuffling going on in that offensive line. I have every reason to believe that the offensive line is going to be healthy for Alabama going into this one, or as healthy as you can be at this point in an SEC season, right? And from center to the left side of that Alabama offensive line, I don't have any questions. Parker Brailsford, Tyler Booker, Caden Proctor, those guys seem pretty automatic to me. So really the question kind of comes on that right side. Jaden Robert, Wilkin Formby, and while I feel great about these starters for the most part, and they've ran the ball really successfully, we're going to kind of talk about the rushing yards and sacks allowed and things like that. We saw what happened to this offensive line whenever somebody went down. So you're one play away from playing musical chairs on the offensive line. And so with that being said, I don't know that this is an area that Alabama fans are as confident in as they were 3-4 years ago. And it was something that was said that last year the offensive line was kind of a step down and kind of a disappointment, for what people had thought the offensive line would be in the preseason for Alabama. So with all that being said, Alabama's rushed the ball very effectively this year. 5.8 yards per carry rushing, that's 26 nationally. And if you ran the ball for over 5 yards a carry for the year, that would be a phenomenal season running the football. And last year, there was some issues with sacks, right? There was, I believe Alabama gave up 30 sacks last year. They've given up 6 so far this year. That's good for 59th nationally. That's, 133 teams. That's right in the middle of the pack. I think they're on pace to do a little bit better than what they did last year. So I think this offensive line is probably a little better in some ways and maybe a little, maybe not as deep, right? Now, Jalen Milroe adds, an element to this offensive line that, you really can't. It's kind of an intangible, the way he can run with the football. It'll bail an offensive line out. I mean, it has done it time and time again throughout college football history. A dual threat quarterback can make an offensive line look a lot better than what it really is. So we're going to see. Now, Georgia's defensive line, as I said, there's no real enforcer here. Christian Miller, I think, is a guy that's got a ton of potential. Redshirt sophomore. He's got 3.5 sacks so far this year, two forced fumbles. That's a guy that I think has got a pretty good opportunity. Excuse me, he doesn't have 3.5 sacks. Crap. Christian Miller is a guy that's a redshirt sophomore. I really like the upside of this guy. Still pretty young, right? Not a ton of experience there at the defensive tackle position, but I think he's one of those guys that's got a really high ceiling. But with these young guys, you get in a game like this, experience can mean a lot, but we'll see who's a gamer, right? Christian Miller, there's a chance that this guy is just an absolute gamer, and we see his best football whenever the lights are the brightest. We will see some of the best college football players. That's how they are. Nazir Stackhouse, senior guy at the nose tackle position. This is the guy that's supposed to be the anchor of your defense, and going to be going up against Parker Brailsford and at times, those guards there on the offensive line for Alabama. I feel like we've seen what we've seen from Nazir Stackhouse. We've seen some good moments, but nothing. His ceiling is pretty high, and I think his floor is pretty high. But not like through the roof or anything. Like I said, probably like a third round NFL talent there at nose tackle, something like that, third, fourth round. Probably going to play NFL football, but just not that game record, that Georgia got accustomed to having over a couple of years. They don't grow on trees. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins is looking to be healthy in this one from everything that I can gather. The redshirt junior is somebody that is going to have to provide some pressure, right? You're going to have he's got to beat his man. And if he doesn't beat his man, then, it's probably going to be tough for Georgia. Georgia likes to go man up. They don't like to blitz a whole lot, and they're going to rely on these guys on the ends there and an outside linebacker to be able to hold the edges and get some pressure. Warren Brinson, a guy that's been hurt, banged up a little bit, senior guy, number 97, he will be back. He rotates off the bench, and, when Georgia played Kentucky, they had several guys on this defensive line that played a ton of snaps, didn't rotate a whole lot at all. So I think we're going to be able to get back to seeing, that rotation of a couple of different defensive lines, and I think that'll be really good for Georgia. We saw the defensive line get wore out in that game against Kentucky, but Kentucky was doing the whole 3 yards in a cloud of dust thing, and it wore on the guys as the game went on, and that was a lot due to the fact that Georgia had several guys out. That is one of my big concerns in this game. I feel like Alabama's offensive line has a little bit of an edge in this category because if you combine this offensive line with some of the playmakers that Alabama's got at running back, we're going to talk about them and Jalen Milroe here in just a minute. But I mean, those are weapons. Those are serious weapons, and it's no secret what this team wants to do. Alabama wants to run the football, and they want to hit you with play action, and they've got a good team to be able to do that. My next area of focus for this game is the Georgia passing game versus this Alabama passing defense. I really like this group of wide receivers that Georgia's got. Is there a first-round talent at wide receiver? No, there's not. There's not. But I feel like there's a bunch of wide receiver twos in this room. Dominic Lovett, guy pictured in the center there, that's the workhorse. That's your possession receiver for this team. That's going to be the guy that gets the most catches this season, I do believe, barring some type of injury or something. That's your workhorse guy. Colby Young, number 8 there. This is your corner of the end zone, your big body receiver, the guy you throw the fades to, the guy you hit on the back shoulder, on the front pylon. That's your guy in the end zone. And I think he's really, really good at it. We haven't seen, we've seen him and he's played good, but Georgia hasn't really needed that, necessarily so far this year. Could have used one, I guess, against Kentucky, but that wasn't the kind of football game that was. And for whatever reason, Kirby's not going to snap out of whatever kind of, pissing contest Georgia was in with Kentucky there. Georgia couldn't figure out a way to throw the football into the end zone for whatever reason. But Colby Young is a guy that he's got to get a touchdown or two this weekend, right? This is somebody you brought in from Miami. You're counting on that big body, and he's going to be going against a pass defense that in some areas is a little bit inexperienced, and in other areas, I think a little bit less talented than what we've seen from the Alabama secondary over the last few years. So we'll talk about that here in a second. Dylan Bell is the wild card for this Georgia offense, in my opinion. Very talented guy, multifaceted guy, can do a lot of different things. played some running back for Georgia last year. I think if you got in a dire pinch and you got down to your 4-string guy or something, he could play quarterback. I mean, that's the type of football player this guy is. He can do everything on the football field pretty well, and he's got really good hands and can make those circus type catches. Not the biggest guy, not the most God given talent in the world, but he is a guy with some really good hands and is a wild card. And at times, whenever he gets going, he can be really, really hard to stop. I'm interested to see how Georgia utilizes him. I think Georgia's going to have to use this passing game an extension of the run game. I think Georgia's going to have to get lateral on this defense because this Alabama defense, if they get bunched up right there in the middle, it's going to be really hard to do anything that Georgia wants to do. So we'll see what Georgia's game plan is as far as that goes. Mike Bobo seems to have been pretty vanilla so far this year. I mean, for the most part, I feel like it almost kind of bit Georgia in the butt at Kentucky there. But I'll hopefully we can get this game in the books and I can quit talking about that Kentucky game. Alabama pass defense. Damani Jackson, Zabian Brown, who is a freshman, and it may be Zabian Brown, it may be Deshaun Jones. We've seen both of them play. Probably going to be Deshaun Jones starting at that right cornerback position. He's the transfer from Wake from last year. But those guys are splitting reps there at the right cornerback position. And then at the left cornerback position, you got Damani Jackson, the transfer from USC, a highly touted guy. You don't necessarily look at USC and think, all right, let me get some defensive players from there. But USC's always recruited well, right? Always had talented fellas. So, we'll have to kind of see. Malachi Moore, from what I understand, is banged up. I don't know that he'll be back or if he will. He won't. I don't know. I don't know. This is college football. You don't have some kind of like real injured list. I know the SEC is supposed to release something for these conference games. I think that'll be released later today, but I got to make this video, so I don't have time to sit there and wait for it. Y'all let me know in the comment section what the deal is with Malachi Moore. I'm genuinely curious. I've read everything that coaches said about it and everything, but you can't listen to these head coaches about injuries anymore. I mean, there's so much gamesmanship that goes into this stuff. If one coach can waste another coach's coaching staff, 2 hours, then they'll waste them. They'll make them waste 2 hours. You know what I mean? Thinking that another player's playing when they're really not. Who knows? Who knows? If he doesn't play, I guess it's going to be Cameron Howard, the transfer from Charlotte, that would be stepping in there at the strong safety position. He's a sophomore, as I said, transferred over, 38 tackles, a pass deflection, and 2 interceptions last year. How does his experience at Charlotte translate over to a game like this? I'm not really sure. For Alabama, fans' sake, obviously you hope Malachi Moore is ready to go, the graduate guy who's got a lot more experience and kind of the experienced guy for this Alabama defensive secondary. And Keon Sabb, he'll be the guy at the free safety position. I think sophomore transfer from Michigan, right? He won the national championship there at Michigan last year as a freshman. 28 tackles, 4 pass deflections, 2 interceptions, and he's off to a really, really good start in 2024 for Alabama. 11 tackles, 3 pass deflections, and a couple of interceptions already this season. So, look, I like some of the pieces that Alabama's got in the secondary. I don't think it's very deep at all, and I think it's very young and inexperienced as far as like quality experience goes for, especially considering what we've seen in Alabama over the last few years, right? We're just 1 year removed from Caleb Downs, in that defensive backfield there. So I don't think this is a great group. Statistically, you could argue that I'm wrong on that, but if you watch with your eyeballs, I think the front end of this Alabama defense has been able to overwhelm some opponents that are not on the level of Alabama or Georgia or really any kind of quality SEC opponent. So I don't think that this pass defense has really been tested. And if Georgia's going to have a shot in this football game, they're going to have to utilize their strengths, which is This is a throw-to-win football team for Georgia, I think, at this point. I love ETN, I do, but beyond that, Nate Frazier, I like him. He's young as heck. He missed picking up blitzes in that Kentucky game, and it really almost cost us, right? And I could totally see that happening in this football game as well, because I think Alabama knows what's up with what Georgia's wanting to do. I know Georgia's going to try to establish the run. They're not going to give up on the run throughout the football game, but Georgia is going to face the same exact thing that they faced against Kentucky. The film's out there. Kentucky was loading the box and sending heat, and Georgia wasn't able to pick it up very well. Now, did Carson Beck get sacked a bunch? No. He played smart football. He got rid of the football a bunch. There was a lot of missed blocks in that football game. It was a bad showing for Georgia's offense against Kentucky. But with all that being said, Georgia's offensive line is going to be down Tate Ratledge. That was their best offensive lineman. So, and he's one of the best guards in all of the country as far as Pro Football Focus goes. So, I think Georgia's going to have to figure out a way to be effective in the passing game and utilize these weapons and try to take advantage of what I think is a weakness for this Alabama defense. Let's talk about the Alabama offense for a minute. Jalen Milroe is a running quarterback. He's a run-first quarterback, in my opinion. Can he throw some deep balls? Yes, he can throw the deep ball. No doubt about it. He's got a beautiful deep ball. And I think his throwing motion is a little bit better this season, just side note. But this is a run-first offense. Jam Miller, Justice Haynes, we talked about that offensive line. They are really good at run blocking. Not as great at pass protection, I don't think. And then you've got this running quarterback, Jalen Milroe, that is a powerful, elusive, smart runner. And I think that makes things really, really difficult for Georgia, right? Ryan Williams, we have pictured here. That's number 2. That is the new freshman wide receiver. He's never been in a football game like this. I'm interested to see how he reacts. Georgia has got one of the best secondaries in the country, if not the best secondary in the country. I'm sure there's a couple teams that would argue. But Ryan Williams, I feel like, is the only real dominant threat in the wide receiver room for Alabama. I feel like you've got a bunch of other kind of like wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s type guys. Ryan Williams has the it factor. I think he's going to be I think he's going to be an Alabama great. I think it's very possible. I know it's early on. It's kind of hard to say that considering how many greats there have been come through that whole program there, but I think this guy's got what it takes. Does he show it in this game? I don't know. 10 receptions so far this year, 285 yards. Guys, if you're doing the math at home, that's a 28.5 average with a long of 84 yards, 4 touchdowns. Ryan Williams is definitely the truth, but Alabama hasn't played a secondary like they're about to play against Georgia, where Georgia is clearly much better in the passing game offensively and defending the pass defensively. Alabama, in my opinion, is better on the lines of scrimmage in this football game. We talk about here on the First and Long College Football Show how important the lines of scrimmage are, and I think the question here for Georgia is, can the lines of scrimmage, the offensive line, the defensive line, can they be good enough? That is the question. I don't know that Georgia's offensive and defensive line has it in them to dominate this football game, but they're going to have to hold their ground. And if they can do that and keep Carson Beck upright, which they've been so good at doing over the last few years, then I think Georgia's got a good chance to win this thing by a field goal. But if Alabama's defensive and offensive line is blowing up these lines of scrimmage like they have, last time these two teams met, then Alabama will absolutely upset Georgia there in Tuscaloosa. And unfortunately for me, I'm going to have to take the plus points. This has been a really, really Close game every time these two teams go at it. I'm taking the underdog here who's playing at home. Give me Alabama +2. And as far as over-under goes, I feel like that's like almost the perfect number. But I would say over just considering the fact that it's a 48. So if you're into betting the game, I don't know that you can bet under in this football game. 48 is not a lot of points, but I could see this one going either way. I'm not betting it with my money, but if I was, I'd say give me Alabama plus the points there in Tuscaloosa.